Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the first Athearn Extra. And hope you guys are doing okay tonight. Welcome to my workshop, and I'm sure many of you out there are probably in your workshop as well. Hey, let's do what we always do, and let's do some shout outs. Let's see who's joining us tonight, real quick. We've got Angela, Forrest, Danny, Ron, Bruno, Abel, Reading Area Rail Fan. We've got Angela, Mark, Train Fan 1995, Ronald. We've got a great show coming up for you guys. We got some great guests. We're going to talk about one of my favorite train shows in a little bit. And yeah, there's so much. It's a really big show. It's a really big show. So let's do some more call outs here, and then we'll get rolling. We've got Steve, Rick, we've got Jack, Michael, Matt, Joshua, Mr. Jim Straka. I know he's going to be happy because I think there's some Conrail Blue in here, Jim. We got some Tom, Frederick, and Christopher. So, hey, you know what? It's Friday night. It's the perfect night for talking model railroading, talking about trains. So let's do what we always do. Let's get comfortable. Let's grab the beverage of our choice, and let's get started with what's going on at Athearn. And let's bring aboard our first guest. I've got with us a man that needs no introduction, Mr. Tony Cook. Hey, Tony.
Hey, Jim. How you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm sure I'm coming down with spring fever.
It's
happening to me already. You know, once you get past the holidays, I'm done all week. It's been single digits here in the Kansas City area. I was down in Texas a couple weeks ago, and that good weather down there, I'm ready for it to be here. So have you been as cold over in your part of Illinois as we've been?
Yeah, it's been like what you were saying, single digits. Definitely no rail fanning going on up here.
No.
Too cold.
So,
you know where else it's probably cold?
Where's that?
I bet Massachusetts is pretty cold this time of year.
Yes, but this is a big time of year for it.
It's a holiday, isn't it? I think it's technically a holiday next weekend.
It is a hobby holiday for sure. Yeah.
I've got a special guest with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, John Saradotti. Let's bring him on board. He's got something to tell us tonight. Hey, John, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well. Hi, guys. How are you?
Hey, John.
So, John, you have got to be running in a million directions right now because what's happening next weekend?
Well, it actually for us starts on Wednesday. But yeah, we're talking about our annual railroad hobby show brought to you by the Amherst Railway Society. And it's time. And I've gotten so many emails and chats and et cetera about thankfully we're back. And people, honestly, there's a pent up demand that's scaring me. Actually, we've had triple the number of early ticket sales. Our hotels are full. I just talked to our lead hotel today. So we'll see what happens, but I'm excited. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of spending going on.
Oh, I'm sure there will be. And, tell us, John, a little bit about the show. How big is this show? Give us an idea how big the show is.
Well, the show, honestly, I could say, and without question, it's the largest show in North America. And I say that for a couple of reasons. It's 350,000 square feet, not counting outside. And lately we've had a bunch of displays outside, including this year, Wiscasset, Waterville, and Farmington is bringing a narrow gauge steam locomotive on 100 feet of track to run back and forth. And we'll have whistle wars when we shout out the beginning of the show again, like we always do. So 350,000 square feet, it's like about 8 acres of trains, I guess, 9 acres, whatever it is. You'd have to do the math. But our numbers, and we can't count this year because I'm not sure what's going to happen this year. But we have for the last 10 years had over 20,000 for 10 solid years. So it's pretty amazing, actually.
Wow. It's one of those shows where I brought a friend here in the Midwest. He had never been to this show, and I purposely took him. What is the second smallest building? Is it the Stroh or the Mallory? I can't ever remember.
Actually, the Mallory, if you count both sections of Mallory, that's the biggest now, and then BLC, and then Young, and then the Stroh building.
So it must have been the Young building, and
yeah,
his breath was taken away, and I said, we're in the second smallest. There's 3 more buildings, and you can just see in his eyes, like, are you kidding me? It's like Disneyland.
Yeah, it actually takes more than one day if you're going to seriously look at everything, which is kind of fun. And I know, and I brag about this too, but we're all biased, I guess, to some degree. But I feel this is the largest dollar grossing train show in the country. I've had more exhibitors tell me they had great sales here, nothing like anything else anywhere else. So if you add up all that together, I mean, people, I used to say, until I got yelled at by, I didn't find something. I used to say, if you can't find it at this trade show, it no longer exists. So now I say it probably no longer exists. I went to your trade show and I went to get something and it wasn't there. And you said, it's that kind of thing. But I mean, that's what I like about the trade show. It's a mix of tables. It's a mix of like you guys, you have your beautiful booths and all that kind of stuff, So it's a mix. But I think people love crawling around on the floor, looking through boxes of that hard to find thing, and then finding it, which is really kind of cool. So between that and layouts, there's 50 operating layouts plus. If you count the little ones, there's more like 60, 65, but of the big ones, the modular layouts, our own Amherst Belt lines is about a scale 8-9 miles of track. It's huge, over 130 modules from all the guys that are members, so there's that kind of stuff. And this year we have streaming cameras in 3 of the 3 largest buildings. Wow. So virtual Railfan will be there streaming for the entire show. So it'll be a lot of fun. And that'll continue, for those folks that can't make it this year for whatever the reason, that's going to continue in the future too. So we should have some fun this year.
It's going to be, I have no doubt, it's going to be a great show. I've never gone to Amherst and not had a good time.
Thanks.
It's just a great time.
It's amazing all the traditions that a show like this brings.
Right.
There's a bunch of guys that rent the club car, that passenger diner car out at this steaming tender. A lot of guys go to the same restaurants all the time, and they hook up. I said, and we have a banquet just for folks that don't want to fight the traffic, and
Sure.
and we don't expect everybody. We do it for the reason of not fighting the traffic, and I don't fight with that tradition. A lot of guys. A lot of competitors, they'll all go to the same restaurant. Hey, I haven't seen you since last year. So I kind of like that tradition. So it's, all in all, taking all of that into consideration, all those details, all those guys that have known each other for years. It's just, I said earlier this morning, it's my favoriteest time of the year, if that's even a word, but it truly is. This is what gets me through. Tony had said earlier he's tired of the weather. This is what gets me at least through January, Tony, and then after this, well, I sleep through most of February because I'm so tired. But then I just have to contend with March, and then we're back into spring.
I know, when I was full time in New Hampshire, it was about a 3-hour trip, and I would start saving my money as a college student in October, November, just start saving up. And then I didn't care about the holidays. I was like, nah, just give me money for the holidays. And January would come and I'd make that 3-hour trek and spend the weekend down there and just have a blast. There's so much to see. And like you said, it takes 2 days to see it all. And you know what? I'd come back to the club the following Tuesday and somebody would say, hey, did you see such and such? No. Where was that? I mean, that's how big this show really is.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, it's incredible. And as you said, there's a lot of shows that are 2 days, and honestly, you can do about any train show in a day, I think, for the most part. But if you ever have plans or haven't been to Amherst, you got to have the 2 days. Otherwise, you'll get there in that one day, if that's all you've allocated, and you'll lose your mind trying to hit everything because it's so much. I mean, going through all the buildings and new products, old products. I mean, I think filled my car. The last time I went was 2016, and the back of the car was overflowing by the time I got out of there. So amazing. White River will be there. Of course, we'll have our booth, latest magazines. You can update subscriptions. You can see our new hardcover and softcover books. So we'll be there, and it should be awesome, John. And how I know we did a show for A Modeler's Life maybe a year or two ago. I can't. Is this the first show in 1 or 2 years? How many years have
2? That's funny, Tony. I remember that.
Yeah.
So our show was the last national show.
That's right.
It's usually always the last weekend in January. The country shut down by March 1st.
Oh.
So that was 2020. And then everything canceled, including us last year. And here I couldn't wait another year. I just think the demand was too great. And honestly, when you look at the newspapers around here, it's starting to subside. So our timing is not bad. I wish we had another 4 weeks, but hey, it's still okay. But almost to the day, but to the same weekend, the calendar being off each year, but to the same weekend, 2 years later, we are the first national show again. So we're the last, and now we're the first. So
awesome.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we're glad to be back. We really are. I can't wait.
Yeah, and the nice thing. Go ahead, Tony.
Oh, and where do we find I know you can just Google Amherst Railway Show, but for folks that are in the area or might be wanting to go, the website to go to, is it Amherst Train Show? I forget what it is.
Actually, we have 2 websites. One for the Amherst nonprofit organization, that's amherstrail.org. But for the train show, it's www.railroadhobbyshow.com. So it's a .com because it's run like a business and that kind of thing. Not it's a branch of the nonprofit, but it's designated for just show stuff, which is why we have a second. But we've got our 2 days of clinics, Thursday and Friday, and that's not quite full this year, but we're still doing well. There's about 50 signed up for it. So you have 2 days. I really wanted to make this into a destination weekend, right? Mm-hmm. So you come Thursday, Friday, you go to clinics. If you go to those clinics, you get a 2-day pass to the show afterwards. So you can make it a 4-day craziness. And the only other thing that I find exciting is we're really getting more and more notice from the international folks. We've got 3 exhibitors from the UK now, 30 from Canada, not counting this year because they can't cross the border. But we're going to do something for those folks coming up pretty soon. And next year, we've already got Rocco Fleischmann, Model Hausenbahn, or whatever it is, on board. So, and I've just this morning been asked to the 2-day big train show in England in this fall. So I'm going to go and see who else is interested in coming out to see us. And we also have a client exhibitor from Australia as well. But that's locked down so tight. I haven't seen him in 2 years, but we'll see him next year, I'm sure.
Well, that's great. And I mean, it's a great show because not only do you have model trains, model manufacturers, you've got historical societies, and you actually have actual railroads there. You've got Vermont Rail that usually sets up a booth, if I remember right.
That is correct. That is very good, Jim. Yeah.
So
it's there's a lot of folks there. So honestly, there's something for everyone having to do with railroads. So whatever your interest is, there's going to be someone. There's even a travel agent there who specializes in traveling all over the United States on trains.
Oh, that's neat.
So it's pretty cool. When they do, they actually designed our raffle prize 2 years ago. It was a 2-day, maybe 3 or 4 day. I forget. It's been 2 years, but it's for 2, all by train. It was really cool. And they organized from this station to that station. They had a cab ready and everything. They did a heck of a job. So, and they'll be there. There's even restaurants that have a flair for railroads at the show. So it's fun. Anything railroad, you name it.
Oh yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's great. John, I want to thank you for coming on the show tonight and tell us about it. If you've not, everybody out there that's watching, if you're on the fence still, and if you can make it out there, I highly suggest you go to the show. It's a lot of fun. You will not regret it. John, I know you're a busy guy, so we should probably let you go, huh?
I appreciate that. Yeah, we'll let the audience know. We talked about earlier because I've got 10,000 things to do, and it was Jim. It was great to see you, Tony. I'll see you soon somewhere. I'm sure it was great to see you. So thank you so much for giving me this chance, Jim. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for coming on board, John, and good luck
All
with
right.
the show.
Take care, guys. Thank you so much. We'll see you.
All right. See ya. All right. Well, that is a busy man.
Oh, he is. Oh my gosh. I mean,
and
when he says he sleeps all through February, I would not doubt that. That yeah,
I wouldn't
a
either.
lot to put on. Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be good to get back to shows. It really is. Now, unfortunately, due to circumstances beyond, Athearn and Horizon's anticipation, we are not going to be able to go. But don't think we're out of the game yet. We've got some big plans coming up. So don't. It's a little bit of a disappointment, especially for me, because that's my home turf. But we've got some stuff that you guys will not be disappointed with, and yeah. But Tony, you're a busy man too, aren't you?
A little bit, yeah. I have 3 magazines for White River. Keeps me a little bit busy. Yeah, my train stuff and the dog. Dog will keep you busy too. So yeah. So now, Jim, a little bit on this show, we haven't, Train Tuesday. Everybody knows, but this new Athearn Extra. Fill us in a little bit. Is this going to be something we'll see monthly on special occasions? Kind of what's the plan? This is a new thing for you.
Yeah, this is kind of uncharted waters for us. This is a chance for our fans and maybe some new fans out there to allow us into their workshop or their layout room. It's going to be a monthly program, and we're going to dive deeper into what we talk about on Train Tuesday. Train Tuesday is usually about 30-40 minutes. We talk about all the new stuff that's coming out for that month, but we should call it deep tracks is what we should call it, because we're going to be talking about January things, but they're going to be going further. I know you're a wealth of information on the prototype side just because you work for White River Publications, and we have other special guests that will come on and talk with us. And it's more than just the model. It's trying to get a feel of, what about the actual prototype? What about some of the historic events that happened around the prototype? Or maybe our guest has special stories about this prototype. So yeah, it's going to be a monthly thing, and it's going to come from the workshop, not a studio.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. This is my workshop. Not that I get a lot of model work done, and my test layout is over here to the side. You can't see it, but that is my more or less workshop. But a lot of it is unpacking photography and testing and for the magazines. But yeah, this is kind of my workspace too.
And so you do Model Railroad News on a monthly basis. You also do the quarterly HO Collector, which is a really cool publication. What other publications do you work on?
Last year, White River added Diesel Era, and I took over that as I edit and put it together now too. In fact, some of the stuff we're going to look at this evening on SD 45-2s is part of a Diesel Era first quarter story that'll be out about February 1st. That next issue will come out. So
that's great.
Neat stuff.
It's always been fascinating to me. I grew up with RMC back in the day. I actually had a small stint when RMC was owned by Karstens out in New Jersey. Unfortunately, I never got to meet Jim Boyd, which I still wish I had. But I know the guys like Otto and all those guys from that. And the magazine, I don't care what people say. There's something about having something tangible in your hands and looking at that glossy paper. I know that's one of the things about my job I always look forward to, is to see what's going on out there, reading about the stuff, and of course the beautiful layout works that we get to see in there.
Oh, it definitely is. And I hear that a lot from people and it's funny too now with Diesel Era, because there are times that I contact people on like rail news shots, and they may have posted it online or something, but then when I ask them for a picture to use in Diesel Era, it suddenly is different. Oh my gosh, that would be really neat. So there is that. It's like, well, you've already put the picture out there online maybe, but there is that different feel to having it in print, like it's official or something now that they got their picture. And it's always fun to get to do that for this next diesel era will have the new CSX F40s that got repainted in that old B&O scheme.
Oh, very
And
cool.
I had a number of guys submit pictures from a trip it made into St. Louis. So it's fun to get to highlight these guys that are shooting and putting stuff out there, but haven't been in print before. So that is very neat.
You know, the other beauty, and I mean, I don't want to say one of the good things about the pandemic, because certainly the pandemic was not good, but we're starting to get out of it. But one of the things that was kind of a, if you want to say a good thing out of the pandemic, was we saw an explosion, I'd say, over the last 2 years of not just YouTube channels, but people like myself realizing that there's YouTube channels. And for model railroaders, you've got all kinds of different things on YouTube right now. So depending on what you're into, you can find it. And I mean, I'm sure you've got some favorites that you watch, and that brings up my next guest. I've got a guest with us tonight who started doing a YouTube channel, I think he said about 9 years ago.
I think so. Yeah, he's been at it a long time, man.
He's been doing it for a while, and he makes it look easy. It's not easy, but he's done a few reviews for Athearn, specifically one of the things we're going to talk about tonight, the SD80 Max. And that's Derek Glass. I'm going to bring Derek on board. Derek, how are you tonight?
Hey. Hi, Jim. Hi, Tony.
How you doing?
Hello, everybody.
So, Derek, you know, as we were saying, we were talking about, you know, for so many years we've had great publications out there from various different publishers, but in the last 2 years, we've seen a real explosion of not only YouTube channels, but people getting wise to the fact that, hey, there's YouTube channels out there for anything model railroading. And you've done quite a bit of reviews on your channel. Tell us a little bit about your YouTube channel and how you got it started.
Well, YouTube, my channel, I got started about 2009. I got back into the hobby. Like everybody else, I did the hobby as a kid. You know, I got my first train set from Santa, but I kind of drifted away in my early teens, and I didn't do any model railroading. I didn't rail fan or anything. I was just pretty much away from trains until I got laid off in 2009 when the recession hit. And I was laid off for about 7 months, and I started getting bored, and I thought, man, like the train itch never went away. So I decided to pull out some old N scale stuff that I dabbled with right at the end of my teen years. And I found an old hollow core door, and I built a little N scale layout. And then I got, you know, I had a YouTube channel for a couple years that I never did anything with. I just had an account and just watched videos. And I discovered the YouTube community side of model railroading. And I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. So I then decided to start building an HO layout in my basement. And actually, I've redone that now 4 times. So what you see in my videos now is the fourth go at it. It just got bigger and bigger each time. But man, I really found a lot of nice people on YouTube. It's a really great community. And I started out just making videos just to share with friends and family of what I was doing, and never realizing it would blossom to what it has now. You know, all of a sudden people started commenting, they started liking what I was doing, and it inspired me to do more and more and more. And that's where you see it now. I mean, I never expected it to become what it has.
Now, it's definitely, you know, you say there's a lot of giants in the YouTube industry. I see Ron from Ron's Trains and Things is in here. You said a shout out for you, Derek. We all know Ron.
I like Ron.
And Ron's another one's got a great channel. He did a review for us in conjunction with Tony on the N-scale Athearn. Now, as an N-scale guy myself, I will watch his videos. And by the way, if you have trouble with track cleaning, he's got a video you guys need to watch. So it does work. But back to you, Derek. I noticed that you are really modeling Norfolk Southern. Kind of, you're in the Pennsylvania area, so I'm assuming that's why. But what was the impetus? What got you to pick Norfolk Southern as a prototype?
That was simple. I mean, when I got back into the hobby, I wanted to do what I know, and that's what's in my area. So that's why it's modern day, and it's Norfolk Southern mainly. It was just kind of like a do what you know kind of thing. and I was away from the hobby for a good 20 plus years, and I had a lot to learn when I got back into it. So I wanted to jump into what I already knew, and but like DCC was completely new to me when I came back into the hobby. Like I did so much research online on DCC and decoders, and then started watching other YouTubers doing decoder installs, and then eventually started doing my own. And now, I mean, you evolve, you know. So, yep.
No, it's really neat to see how all of these YouTube channels, and there's guys that have, you know, maybe under 1,000 fans that I'll watch, all the way up to the big guys. And but the cool thing is it's so accessible. You know, we can all just find it very easily. And
well, that's another nice thing. As I learn something, then I pass it on. So, and that's what's nice about social media. I mean, social media has really helped with model railroading in general. I mean, it's out there, it's everywhere.
Yeah, definitely. Tony, you've just recently in Model Railroad News, I think, I don't remember which model it was, but you kind of gave a shout out to Derek. You guys were kind of working together on something.
I think the first time was it this Conrail SD80 Max, that first run of those, I think was that I mentioned, because he had a good video on it. Because I do a lot of that. I check as whether I'm editing a review that someone else has written or putting together a review on something myself. I do a lot of checking across YouTube to see, like, well, I noticed this, or I wonder if this is everybody catching this too. So it's kind of fun that you kind of look over at somebody else's paper and see what they came up with too. So I look at a lot of those videos, and I ran across Derek there, and of course I know him through Midwest Model Railroad in Kansas City. And I didn't know that at first. I think I mentioned Derek to Stephen Atwell there at Midwest one time. He said, "Oh yeah, I know him. That we sponsored your stuff with his videos." Like, oh wow! So it's amazing how all this kind of runs together in the hobby. That once you start watching or connecting with people, it's like, oh yeah, I know that person, or oh yeah, I work with this or that. But a lot of these YouTube guys, well, and you set me up here in this last week. We're sharing that Canadian Pacific. Is it a 70 ACU with Ben? Is it up in Canada?
Ben of BA Rail Systems. He does a lot of Canadian stuff for it. And if you haven't seen his YouTube channel, I'm sure you guys have, but to the audience out there, if you're a Canadian modeler, check out BA Rail System. He's got a really beautiful layout. The guy is talented. I would love to just get close to what he does as far as his scenery and stuff. But Tony, a little bit, we never asked you, but give us a little bit of background on, you know, what was the impetus for you to get into model railroading and turn into a career?
I always was. My dad was both a rail fan and a model railroader. And like when I was a little kid, Dad worked at Walthers in the late 60s, way back when in Milwaukee. And Dad was always a rail fan, model railroader. He custom painted back in Athearn Bl2 days. Grew up in the St. Louis area, so I saw Dad paint tons and tons of Frisco and Mopac on blue box shells, and for the local hobby shops and things. So yeah, that was typical. A Saturday was to head down to St. Louis or up to like Springfield, Illinois, and watch trains and hit the hobby shops. And so trains were always something I did. And then I got more interested in the hobby's history in the 90s and started collecting older stuff. And as eBay came on and finding things at shows, kind of documenting HO's history was kind of a hole or a void that wasn't really that well covered, and started doing that with websites, and kind of one thing led to another, and then ended up, it's been 10 or 11 years with Model Railroad News, and HO Collector just finished its 5th year, so it's starting its 6th. And then again, DeSolera came along last year, so I can cover stuff from new models to when they're collectible to where they were prototypes. So that's kind of a fun thing to kind of see that whole circle of the real one to the model to, once it gets vintage, we'll cover it again.
Yeah, no, it's always neat to get the HO Collector and see, and it's kind of funny because sometimes we forget, manufacturers like Athearn. We just celebrated our 75th anniversary, and I think a lot of us in some way had an older Athearn. You know, for me, it was a blue box F unit, and remember the wide nose Jeep 7/9s, that the old blue box. You know, and it's kind of like when you see that in the pages of HO Collector, it's like seeing an old friend. You know, it's you may have these Genesis models on your layout that are, you know, you may have weathered them and they're up to the nth degree, but you still have a soft spot for those old, you know, old models of the past.
Oh, and that I always see that with anything we run. I always end up with an email of, "Oh, that was the first model I ever built," or "Oh, I always wondered who made that or where that came from. Like I had that as a kid, but you know, my brother broke it, or I don't have it anymore, and I always wondered what that was and when it was made." So it's always fun to see that connection that, you know, lights somebody up. Like this current HO Collector has the SD9 that was introduced by Athearn in '74.
Okay.
And I already saw a couple people posting like pictures of their old blue box SD9s, like saying, still running on my layout and still going strong. And, you know, again, it's fun. It kind of touches that, you know, it's nostalgia, but again, they're like old friends, the old models we have.
Really is. Really is. Well, tonight we're going to talk about a little, you know, I introduced it on Train Tuesday as something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. We've got SD90 Mac H's, or the OG SD90 we're going to talk about. Tony, I know you've got some really cool pictures from a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about tonight. We're also going to talk about the SD80, and I see Derek's got his SD80 sitting back there. I've got an SD80 behind me hiding. And then we're going to talk about something that's really cool. And Tony, you're the one that told me about this. I was working in the office one day, and I get a phone call from Tony, and he says, "Hey, Jim, I know you like bicentennial stuff. Guess what BNSF is doing?" And to my surprise, they're restoring SD45-2 5704 to its original paint scheme as it appeared in 74, 75. And then they're going to donate it, right, Tony?
Correct. Yes, it's going out to a museum in California, and none of them were delivered in bicentennial, but in '75 they repainted a number, 5 of them. So it's going into that bicentennial paint, 5704. Last update I heard, it is now primed and is expected to be out in like the next week or two. It's being done at Mid-America Car in Kansas City.
Oh, so not too far from you then.
Mm-hmm. I've been in to see it now. I've got a picture to share of it in the paint booth when they were sandblasting it. And they're even backdating some things, because obviously it got ditch lights, it got like a nose light, and they capped the upper light. They're fixing a lot of that stuff, so cosmetically it will again look like it did in the mid '70s. So those are really awesome, you know, diesels as well. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, let's get started. And, you know, as I get started, I am watching the comments. If I see something that's a comment or a question that's directed about what we're talking about now for any three of us, I'll throw it up there and one of us will answer the question. We, again, thank you for having us in your workshop tonight. And it's, like I said, it's 3 guys, and we're going to talk model trains tonight. So I can't think of a better way to spend the Friday night. So first up is the SD90 Mac H. And this is new. You know, for some folks, they were like, well, you guys have done an SD90 before. But those were later phases. We did an SD90 43, but this is the actual SD90 Mac H, not the modified cab. And I vaguely remember reading about these in print back in the mid 90s. Tony, do you remember that?
I remember when they came out. I've got some pictures of those. Let's see if we can hit the share thing. And boop. There, I think you've got that.
All right, there we go. Yeah, we got a neat picture here we'll add. Wow.
This is when it was being unveiled. I think this is September of '97. This is from Kevin U. Daly's collection, and this is at EMD in LaGrange that they had. Like, then they would do this a lot. They had like an open house event. You can see there's a Chicago belt switcher there in between, and then the Champion and Atlantic Coastline. I think it's an E6, and then that's a Mac brand new.
Wow.
And it's an interesting looking. It's similar to the 80 Mac with that kind of flat back end, the flared radiator moved up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys are doing this. I think this was a demonstrator, and 8204 is in the announcements that are available for pre-order right now, isn't it?
That is, yeah. And
I like that paint scheme.
Yeah, it's a really, and it certainly is indicative of the 90s. It definitely reminds me of the 90s with that color scheme. But if I remember right, I was doing some reading on this. This paint scheme was also kind of a throw to their anniversary. It was the 75th anniversary for EMD, wasn't it, Tony?
I think it is, and this does again. This, if you go back to like EMD demo paints to the 60s, that blue color and that kind of turquoise color below there, it held some of those like traditional colors as well. And I believe this was demonstrator, not a lease. There were some lease units, but I'm thinking they were those dark like maroon or red.
Oh yeah, right.
So I think this is truly demonstrator. I think I have another picture, but I'm going to have to give a warning here because I know all three of us are Ford people. Now, I do have a Cadillac as well as my Lincoln, but I know
I wasn't going to mention the Cadillac.
Yeah. But my main car is my Lincoln, and I know that both you guys have got Mustangs.
Right. Oh no!
But look at that.
Hey, that is a nice C5 in the middle. I like that.
Yeah. Okay. Here's my legal disclaimer to all the Chevy guys out there. There's nothing wrong with a Corvette. I have respect for Corvettes and Camaros.
I'll take a Corvette.
But now, I bet you, Tony, you probably know the background on this picture because EMD and the Corvette, they have a little bit of a past, don't they?
Oh, I mean, it's all General Motors, yes. So yeah.
But remember, there was a certain locomotive that they let the Corvette engineers do some work on.
Is that the 30 had the Jeep 30 in the early 60s had the automotive team. That's how it kind of got some of its sleekish looks. But as I remember you asked about these, and I was pulling slides and shooting them. And I think I sent this to you that day going, oh my gosh, wouldn't that picture be nice if they got those rotten Corvettes out of the way?
Dustin, I had to put Dustin's comment up there. Not to quote Gene Shepard, but some men are Baptists, others are Catholic. My dad was an Oldsmobile man. So I had to throw that up there.
There you go.
Now this was the day. Was this when they actually unveiled it? This picture here, Tony?
I think this again. It's September of '97. I don't know. Obviously, looking at the Mac in all these pictures, they're all dated the same. So it would have had to have been. I mean, it looks brand new. And EMD would do these open houses. I think also it was kind of an employee thing and other stuff because I've seen pictures over the years that like Jim Boyd and other people took that are in Kevin Udaley's collection that are these kind of shots where there's old power and then whatever's the newest power is there on display as well. So I'm guessing this might have been, part of the reason was the unveiling of the 90 Mac that day. But it's quite a neat, and you guys this is the first time or second time. I get some of these 80, 90s like this. I know the 80s been done before, but this is the first time for the 90 Mac H? And this is what the phase 1
version
the
80s been done. Yeah, this is the first time. Yeah, it's one of those things where, we've done 90s variants of the 90, but not the Mac H. And the Mac H, I jokingly call it the OG, to sound like I'm younger than what I really am. But this was the first one and not modified. If you look at the SD90 Mac 4093, by the time they get to the 4093, UP had requested that the nose, the corner of the nose be chiseled a little bit for visibility. And if you look at our past releases, you'll see that. Whereas with this one, it's almost identical to the cab of the SD80. It's that, it was just, and this was kind of the point where EMD was starting to get into the North American safety cab, something the Canadians had known about for many, many years.
They're sharp looking. And I remember those trucks at first looked so odd. Because the way the truck side frame seems so little and it just hangs up above the axle. Remember the first time I saw those, they seemed really odd looking, but it's a very interesting piece. And what it's coming out in this and then Union Pacific,
Yeah, we're doing 4 different Union Pacific ones. We're doing them from 2 different, slightly different eras. But UP in the end, they didn't really. They were the only ones that really got the Mac H. Now the next one that we'll talk about in a minute, the SD80, had a really interesting history about it, but we'll talk about that in a moment. So this one, Tony and Derek, this is going to be Genesis 2.0. So it's going to have all those lighting features that we've had in the past. You're going to have the light, the number boards. You're going to have the headlights. You're going to have the ditch lights and the ground lights, which is really cool.
I really like that. That is such
the ground lights. I mean, there's some guys. It may sound silly to somebody that's not a modeler, but to a modeler, ground lights just make sense because guys do operate in a nighttime setting, if you will. I've been to a couple of op sessions where they do that, and it makes sense. And the other thing that these really, really shine at is with the Tsunami 2, the dual Sugar Cube speakers. It just sounds phenomenal.
Yeah, the speakers are nice in those.
Yeah,
now you're doing those in an NS patch also, aren't you?
The 90 Mac H's or the 80s?
The 90 Macs.
We did 90 Macs earlier. I think it was last year, and they were patches, and they actually ended up getting in real life. They became the SD70 ACUs in some cases. But yeah, you're absolutely right.
I thought you were doing NS patched UP ones in this run too, along with the Indiana Railroad.
That was that was last January, which means those guys should be coming out here pretty soon.
Okay.
So you're right.
A little bit backwards.
Yeah, you're thinking of the and like I said, we've done so many variations of this. That was the SD90 Mac. I believe those were 9043s, which were not the engine originally. It wasn't the 710 like they originally wanted to have. The 710 had a lot of problems, and kind of the Achilles heel of this locomotive, which in 1995 when they first announced it, this was going to be the next generation, if you will, of mainline motive power. And I remember reading about it as a kid and thinking, man, I just got done rail fanning GP18s. This thing's a monster. This thing's huge. Well, that's really cool, Tony. Thanks for sharing those pictures with us. I know you've got more pictures too. But yeah, for anybody out there that wants something really unique from the mid to late 90s into the early 2000s, here you go. And UP was really ultimately the only ones that got the H variant. We're going to be doing those in the demonstrator scheme that you see here. And Tony and Derek, I think we all agree that demonstrator scheme is pretty slick.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, those are hard. Those kind of things are hard not to pass up. Especially the collector in me always wants those.
Yeah, I have a collector streak in me too, and it hurts my wallet.
Yeah,
I think we all do. I think we're guilty of that. So the next engine I want to talk about tonight is the SD80, and here's one that really hits close to home because, again, growing up in New England, Conrail was king when I was young. And here's Conrail, who started pretty much in the ashes of Penn Central, using cobbled together Jeeps throughout the 70s. And then in the 80s, they start getting more progressive. And then when they become their own company, free of the government, all of a sudden they come out of left field. I remember reading Trains magazine and seeing this picture and thinking, what on earth is this SD80? This thing is crazy. Looks like, Tony, you got a really cool picture I'm going to bring up here. Yeah, that's what I remember. And this is
really awesome. I love that white, the quality variant paint where they put the white band across the nose. And I think this is a Norfolk Southern picture, but early on, this is 2000, right after the 99 split. You can see the PRR reporting under the road number, the reporting mark.
Still have the marker lights.
Yeah, and still has the red. So this is very much still as it was Conrail. And I think you guys are doing a whole bunch of these different the patches, because they go NS, CSX, and their CSX paint. And I know I went looking for those and I did locate a few CSX for you, but it's surprising how these spread between NS and CSX and have so many variations to their look.
So, Derek, I don't know, did you ever get to see one of these in real life?
Nope, that's when I kind of just disappeared from the railroad scene for a while. I missed a lot of history. I missed a lot of good stuff.
Well, the good news is there's a lot of good stuff still coming out, so you haven't missed it all. But
no,
I think I've told Tony this story, and if I've said it on Train Tuesday, I apologize. But for any of the new listeners, I distinctly remember a railfan trip in Western Massachusetts in the mid to late 90s, and you'll enjoy this one, Tony. It was the railfan vehicle of choice that day was a Taurus show. and in its day, that was a pretty fast car. Actually,
the SHO was that was the hot Taurus. Yeah,
that was the hot one. Yeah, that was the Tim Allen's version of a sedan. But it made a great rail fan. We're going all.
Oh, did we lose Jim there, Derek? Are you having trouble?
Yeah, he's dropped off there.
Let's see if he works his way back here in a second. He must have run into a snag on the internet.
I think he gets a little spotty service there sometimes.
It can happen, unfortunately.
Yeah.
These 80 Max, this pair here, 7206 up front and 7201 are working as helpers in Pennsylvania. Do you recognize that Manor Branch Fork, Derek? I don't recognize that part of Pennsylvania.
No, I don't know that place.
Yeah, I don't know where that is. That's a Jim Conroy photo from 2000. But boy, those are sharp looking units. And essentially,
I like those.
This 80 Mac, this one and that one SD60i are almost like Conrail exclusives that Athearn Genesis has done. That Conrail was the big buyer of both of those.
Yes.
And I'm trying to remember, that's what radial AC, that red underneath the number is for. They had what on the I guess it's a wheel slip thing that it monitors the axles to make them work. And they first started doing that stuff, I think, on the SD40-2s in the 80s. And then this radial AC is what that red logo is underneath the cab. And I believe that is another wheel slip thing that EMD was working on at the time. It's a shame both these 80s and 90s kind of were the last, this EMD didn't. This is where GE kind of took over there. There's Jim. Hey.
Man, living in the rural fields of Illinois, you see the strangest things hanging out your window at night. I'm going to blame the people from Venus on that one. Yeah, sorry about that. That's one of the advantages of broadcasting from an abandoned farmhouse. Anyways, yeah, we were rail fanning in Western Massachusetts, and we came upon a small town that had a railroad days, and parked on the siding, Conrail had parked what we see here, an SD80. And I just remember walking through that locomotive, and that was the first time I saw what they called the desktop display, and thinking, wow, Gene Roddenberry must have designed this, because it looked like a show that was popular at the time. And totally unlike anything I had seen before. Tony, did you get to see one of these guys out in the wild?
I'm trying to remember the first time I was in something that had that desktop control, because that's kind of mid to late 80s, I think. And it's so different from that usual stand that the engineer would be sitting in his chair and had like the console in front of him and is looking out, ahead. That this suddenly had this, again, as you say, kind of computery feel or look, that it was totally different. And now I think this is a Genesis 2.0, or is
this is Genesis 2.0? In fact, Derek, you did a review on the last year's model, and that was Genesis 2.0.
Now this year's model is going to break my wallet. Thanks a lot. I'm gonna have to get the NS patched ones.
Well, yeah, and honestly, as much as I love Conrail, the one that we need to talk about that nobody's talked about yet, and this is where Athearn and the developers really had fun. Now, in the past we've done the legendary liveries where we'll do an ES44 DC and Chessie, something kind of fun. But how many in the audience knew that C&W actually had an order for SD80s and they were actually built to Conrail specs? Yeah, Tony does.
Of course, Tony does. He knows everything.
Yeah, he is our guru. He really is. Tony, do you know a little bit about that story?
It's one of the, and there's a number of orders like that when you start looking at with mergers and takeovers, and some of those I think make the best what if, like you're doing a legendary livery of the Northwestern, it'll have the green zigzag, the paint, it'd be what it would have been. They were putting an order together and planning to order them right there in the mid 90s when the Union Pacific merger was coming through. And essentially that was, no, we're not going to do that. And it got canceled. And again, this is a story that gets repeated a lot with either stuff that gets delivered right at merger time, like the Jeep 50s for Frisco. They order them. I think they get one in the red and white or the Mandarin and white scheme, and the rest come B in. So there's a lot of that kind of thing that'll happen where this would have been this railroad, but a merger happened and either the order gets canceled or they get painted, or like that one Orphan Frisco came through as a 50. But yeah, there would have been, and I assume your numbering, I'd have to look that up, if sometimes the numbers are even set as these orders are going. So it really is a close what if. And I think those are even better than the usual legendary livery type things. Like you're doing Illinois Central, I think, in what, the SD70s?
Yeah. Which
Illinois, those are awesome. To think, well, what if ICG survived?
Exactly.
That orange and white. Like that's very cool. But these, I think, kind of have an even better place, kind of in collectability, because of that story behind them. Of Northwestern almost did have these. So, and that's what you're doing in multiple numbers.
And that's where, we were talking earlier about all the YouTube channels and things like that. The other thing that's helped Athearn out quite a bit over the last 2 years, really, is programs like this and, our social media. We had a lot of guys say, hey, if you ever do the SD80s again, can you do a legendary liveries C&W? And it didn't take long for our developers to come upon this information that you're talking about. And it's kind of like James Bond, it could happen. Not exactly, it never did happen, but it could have happened. And, honestly, those C&W really, the SD80s would have worn that paint scheme really well.
Really well. Yeah, that would have been very cool.
So Derek, do you see any C&W in your future?
Oh, I don't know. Secret.
Yeah. And the thing that made it interesting was, from what I have read and what I've had some C&W experts talk to me, say that these were going to be built to Conrail specs. So they're going to be built at the same time as the ones that we're seeing here in this picture. Makes me wonder, though. I wonder if they would have had the red marker lights.
That is interesting. Yeah, I don't know that part of it. And that kind of thing happens too, where, like that one group of Rio Grande SD50s. They wanted tunnel motors, but it was too late that the 50 was around. So their Chessie SD50s that Rio Grande gets a last order of, or they get their order of SD50s built to Chessie spec, even with like the mailbox slot in the battery box doors and that. So that kind of thing happens too, where it's like, well, prototype wise, it really matches this railroad, but this other railroad got it because, well, they were coming down the line. So they said, you can have the same, I assume it works out as some kind of deal that Northwestern to get these the same as the Conrails.
I think I've got something coming up behind me here.
Hey, Jim, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
The NS patched models that Athearn will be releasing, do you know if they will have red marker lights, or will they be like a later later Norfolk Southern thing where they plated them off, or
I believe for the Conrail ones, they will have the red marker lights, but later ones, depending on the year, I'll have to look at the years again. In some cases, NS just painted over those marker
Right.
lights. So
I
I
didn't
think
know if they would have any operational ones or if they
yeah, I don't know.
in the
I'm
models or
bringing
not.
mine up here. I don't remember what number you had. I apologize for the light because one of our cameras went down earlier this afternoon, so I had to bring this together. But here's the Genesis 2.0 SD80 from the previous run.
The
And that's
previous
the one.
release, the Conrail ones did have operating marker lights.
Yeah.
But I didn't know if the future release of the NS patched ones would have that or not.
You know what? I can probably check while we're talking. Let me check my notes here real quick, and let's find out.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, you're not putting me on the spot. These are the kind of things that everybody wants to know because depending on what year you're modeling, things of that nature, you're going to want to know. So let's see. And Tony, now when these, after the split up of Conrail, obviously these went to Norfolk Southern and CSX. And I was surprised by this. I actually didn't know this, but one of those locomotives actually ended up in YN2 paint, the blue and gray with the yellow.
I did. I think. Let me see if that's one of the ones. I think the later. Here's that. I think that's the completely repainted. And this is one you're doing. And what there's 801. There's two different number series. And I forget what the other number series is for CSX. And then there's the solid blue newer schemes. But
right. Yeah, we're doing the patched 4591, which is still in the YN2 paint as it appeared between 2001 and 2007. And then we're doing, depending on who you are, the YN3, or some rail fans jokingly refer to it as the dark future, 2003 to 2008 era, which is kind of the darker blue and gold paint scheme. So we're doing two numbers of those.
And yeah, this is pretty much an odd duck. I think when you ask about this, I went looking, and then you said, yeah, this is the only one. I got this photo from Paul Withers, who's the founder of Diesel Era. Said, hey, do you by chance have one of these? This is in Montgomery, Alabama in 2000, a Greg Williamson shot, and looks pretty fresh. But yeah, that's awesome. And I think there was some back and forth on these 80 Max when they split the Conrail fleet up. And I'd have to remember that. But I remember as we did that first review, as we covered the prototype, at some point they did some swapping of something. And I think NS ends up with the bulk of them.
They got all of them.
Yeah, they got all of them at some point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, this was a fairly short-lived thing that, they split it first, but then they did a little horse trading later. No pun to the Norfolk Southern.
And Derek, to answer your question, so we're doing 3 in the Norfolk Southern patch jobs. Okay. All 3 of those are going to have the red marker lights that Conrail was known for. Pretty much they're going to be as they appeared in between 2001 to 2004, all the way to 2006. So there's some various patches. In fact, the picture that Tony had up earlier is very similar to one that we're doing. So there you go.
Made me think about the marker lights, whether the models would still have those or not.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, originally they just put them to work. Even the CSX one, if you look there, you can see the red marker lights are still there. They probably didn't use them, and then as time progressed, they repainted them. And I've seen pictures of some of the Norfolk Southern ones where they just simply painted over the marker lights. Yeah. And other times they patched them over. They sheeted over them.
That's very cool. That's very cool. They'll have the marker lights.
And so now you've got an excuse to add to the collection of the SD80s.
Yes, thanks a lot.
That's that's the thing about this hobby is even if you go to a certain prototype like what you're doing, Derek, you still find models that you somehow justify. And you know what? Rule number one, it's your railroad. You can do whatever you want. But isn't that funny how you can look deeper into the prototype and say, hey, okay, yeah, they did have SD80s. They came from Conrail, or,
Yeah.
vice versa. Brings me to my next subject is, do you think BNSF would ever do a bicentennial locomotive, Tony?
Well, they're working on that now, bringing one of them back. So
Right,
yeah,
they are. That is that's something that I didn't see coming. And like I said at the beginning of the program, you called me up one day and said, hey, guess what BNSF's doing?
I didn't realize at the time, it's the SD45-2s, and we can kind of walk through the 3 orders that Santa Fe had to, because you've announced a new run of SD45-2s that's available for pre-order, through the end of the month, and
Right.
for delivery next spring of 2023, which
Yeah.
seems like a long ways away, but it's just a year from now.
It's
Uh,
not too far.
But yeah, I'll bring that up. There's the SD45-2s basically exist because the Santa Fe, Clinchfield bought some, and Erie Lackawanna bought some. There's 3 orders, and all of this is information that'll be in the first quarter diesel era, which I go to press with next week. So it'll be out the following week. It'll start arriving. That's first quarter 2022 edition. There were 90 units that Santa Fe bought. It was a follow-up to their SD45s that they've had a lot of those too. They were a major buyer of that from the mid 60s. So same 3,600 horsepower. This is just the dash 2 version of that model. Their first group they got in 1972 was the only group to come in the bookends or this regular freight scheme that had been around since they retired the zebra scheme, the black, in the early 60s. This is the class unit. 5625 is the first number of that 1972 group, and this is how it looked. This is a 1973 shot from Kevin U. Daly's collection in Amarillo. This is early phase. As you can see, it has no anti-climber up front. This is pretty much the as delivered look, and this is what I cover. I go through this group was 5625 to 5661 is the 72 class, and then later in diesel era in 2022, I'll follow up with the next 2 orders, which will include the bicentennials. Here's 5682. This is from the second group. So this would be the 1973 order that they did select the 5 units to repaint. As you can see, we got anti-climbers on the front now, has been added. And then they took 5700 to 5704 and painted them in 1975. They would have basically been fairly new units, and they got repainted into this bicentennial look. They got the big plate on the side with the seal put on them. They were really fantastic looking units, and they did the 5 of them. Kind of, you can see the war bonnet there on the red, where they kind of mix that with that traditional, I guess Seaboard Coastline was first with the bands of stars like that on their U-36. So boy, these are sharp looking units.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And this is the one. Now this is as it was in early 1976, and as you can see there, it's behind the tender of the American Freedom train working in Fort Worth. This is a Dick Pelb shot. So this is 5704 that up until sometime last year, I think it was in Mississippi, ready to be scrapped someplace.
Oh wow.
And they were able to save it. BNSF donated it, and it went to Mid-America Car. They started sandblasting and working on it to repaint it, and it will go out to a Southern California museum where it'll be on permanent display. And as I say, right now it's being painted. Let's see if we get, I'm going to jump to, this is the next order, the third and final order from 1974. As you can see, we still have anti-climbers, and if you notice, the radiator screens have kind of that paper air filter look to them, that they stick out a bit as compared to the flat screens on like the first 2 orders. So this is the third order, and the third order is very small. It's, I think, like less than 10 units. And these 2 other orders came in yellow bonnet or this freight war bonnet scheme. They started rebuilding them in the 80s and made SD40-2Bs. They made 8 of those across 1987. And then SD45-2Us, They rebuilt 69 of the 90 units across 86 and 88. At that time, they renumbered them to 5800s, which Athearn has done those in the past. And then for the failed SPSF scheme, you can see this is in Kodachrome in 87. They did get 7200 series numbers for a while, but this is back to, this was its rebuild number.
Okay.
And then they make it all the way up to, this is the Jim Boyd shot that's not that old, 6400 number series, working on BNSF, and some did get repainted in BNSF. So this is essentially what 5704 more or less look like, with ditch lights, the light in the nose, the light above there at the number boards capped over. This is what it looked like when it was brought into Mid-America Car, and this is what it's going to be turned back into. This is Stephen Priest shared this with me. He is a local guy here in Kansas City, well-known modeler. He was editor of Railroad Model Craftsman. Paired Rail is his company, and he does a lot of this kind of design work. And he got involved in the project and contacted me about it, saying they were doing this. And this is the paint diagram that Mid-America Car worked with to paint 5704 back into Bicentennial. This is how I saw it. Oh, the weather was still warm at the time, so it was probably maybe October, I think, something like that. And as you can see, there's ditch lights, and they haven't done all that yet, but they're starting to sandblast and fix things. The ditch lights, I was told, were coming off. The nose was going to be fixed, so it had the getting rid of that light and putting the light back up. It's going to have a plate for the seal on the side like it had at the time, and it should be out in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, wow.
Will be out on display. And it really, I mean, that's going to be amazing to see, because, wow, these were so eye-catching. And again, it's amazing to think this is being done. But BNSF donated it. Stephen Priest and some other people worked on getting it, set up here with Mid-America Car and repainted. So exciting that a Bicentennial is going to be coming back, and you guys are doing an HO model of it again.
Yeah.
We've done it before, but we'll be seeing it again.
Yeah, 5704. In fact, I think I've got one on my layout here coming up the view now. And yeah, 5704. Yeah, I was really excited about that. This is a impressive locomotive. I think one of the better Bicentennial paint schemes too, to be honest with you. It held up really well. I was saying on Train Tuesday, there were some paint schemes that came out in the 70s that were conservative, and there were some that were frankly gaudy. And then there were others that were really very nice. And this is one that holds up nicely. It was a nice, like you were saying earlier, a nice blend of the Santa Fe war bonnet with the vertical stripes and stars. It was just a nice treatment all the way around.
And you're going to have the working strobes. This did have the strobes on each side of the cab, in place of, they were delivered with that prime strato beacon sat up next to the horns, kind of that amber.
Yeah.
Orange. But these white strobes is how the Bicentennials were. I don't know if the restored one, I don't think it's getting that back. But again, that was the look of the 5 units. And they were assigned at that time anyway to priority stuff. Chicago basically to the West Coast, and you see them a lot on the Transcon, haul and piggyback trains. Yeah.
I mean, we're also doing the pinstripe or the billboard paint scheme, which I might be in the minority here, but I always liked that paint scheme. I actually like that a little bit better than the blue and yellow war bonnet.
I agree. In fact, when I started that layout for Diesel Era, because that first group of 72 got repainted, I had pictures of both. And I thought, I'm going to stick to just how they originally looked and go through the whole run in that bookend scheme. Because, like you, there's something about it that I think it's kind of classy looking, that I like it quite a bit too.
Yeah, it's, I may be a little biased, but it's just really cool. And we have done that paint scheme on the SD45-2s before. Now, of course, the Bicentennial, we've done this in a couple of different runs, but we had to bring it back because of what BNSF is doing. But we also wanted to bring back the billboard or the pinstripe paint scheme. We hadn't done that I didn't think we had done it, and then somebody corrected me on Train Tuesday. Said, "No, you did one of those a long time ago." And yeah, it was a long time ago. It was way back in 2007 that we did those. And so since I'm a fan of that, I see some Santa Fe in my future, even though I'm an East Coast modeler. What about you, Derek?
Hey, you've seen some West Coast stuff lately on my layout, haven't you?
Yeah, you've been dipping your toe in the water lately. We've seen some Union Pacific. You did some Fast 40s recently.
Yeah.
Oh, those
Yeah.
are sharp. Yeah.
Yeah, they were nice.
It's an exciting time to be in the hobby in general because, you know, you have things like this going on. BNSF, thankfully, somebody, you know, had the foresight to save that unit, because it seems hard to believe now for the older folks in the room that an SD45-2 is an old locomotive. But when you think about it, even the Dash 9s, which when I was into rail fanning as a younger person, those might have been Star Trek as far as I was concerned. And now those are considered old, you know, so it's a part of preservation. I'm glad to see that BNSF has done that, and it's going to a good home once it's done.
Yeah,
That's
a beautiful locomotive.
I can't remember. I have one of those from when they first came out. That's 2005 is when that was announced by Athearn Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
Out of that first run, I have one of the bicentennials, but I got to go digging around and see what number I have and if I ever got one of the bookends. And the bookends came with black trucks and black pilots, and then they did repaint the trucks silver without repainting them into yellow bonnet. So there is a variation to both those. So the real hardcore as delivered 45-2s also have black trucks, which kind of set them off and look different.
Now, one of the things that a lot of people ask us on Train Tuesday, and if Janik or John comes on, they're like, where do you get all this? Where do you get all this data? Now, Tony, you'll appreciate this. A lot of guys are like, oh, you go find that on the internet. And that's true. The internet is a great resource, but there's nothing better than a book, right? A book or a magazine. Like, I know I've used Diesel Era quite a bit in my past, but this is a book that I picked up a few years ago, Bicentennials. And I've got it bookmarked here. We've got some great shots of 5704 back in 77, actually. And I'll just hold that up there real quick just so you can see. But these are the type of things that Athearn uses in its research. It's just one of the many tools that we have in our toolbox. And if you're a prototype modeler and you know, maybe you still prefer putting on your own details and doing your own paint, this is a great resource to have. You know, and in that light, Tony, tell us a little bit about Diesel Era and how that helps the prototype modelers.
Well, like that Diesel Era run that I'm doing is typical of what the magazine does with that run going through the different orders that were done. Let's see, I've got, you know, as I said, this is in fact, this is the first time anybody will see this. I just finished it this week. This is the number one first quarter for next year. It'll go to press next week. And the first group of SD45-2s from 72 will be covered. And I basically go through them from 5625 to 5661, you know, pointing out differences when things were changed, from like coupler cut levers being modified with turn down handles to up, and, you know, beacons and other things changing. And Diesel Era is great for that kind of thing because you get these kind of shots like this one here, 5670 there at Tehachapi. And you can see some modification here with that awning behind the cab there for the air intake. And then those other panels, those vertical panels that were put up there by the exhaust and such, that you get to see that kind of stuff in the magazine. That's fantastic for detailing, or if you want to really get specific on a number, like what things were done to them at what time, you know, what era did they get these kind of changes. Because that obviously is a much later, I forget the date on that, but that unit would have been delivered in the yellow bonnet because of its number. But again, with those modifications to it, there's a lot of things that have been done there differently after the fact. So it's a great source for that kind of thing, roster information. We publish quarterly, 68 pages. And you can find out more on it by going to shop.whiteriverproductions.com. And Diesel Era for me was always, I mean, when we got the magazine, it's like I had every back issue. Whenever something would get announced, that's one of the first things I would do. Hey, did Diesel Era ever cover those Jeep 38-2s or whatever? And go digging and looking for that information. That it's a really good resource.
Yeah, there's still something to be said about having a physical book or a magazine of something. That there, believe it or not, there are things that you cannot find on the internet.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, and it's a nice. I have them out all the time when I'm digging and looking for stuff. That it's a good resource to have out. I don't, it's hard to explain, but again, as working through that kind of stuff, and I didn't realize there was an SD45-2 general article done back in the 90s, but the magazine had never covered the Santa Fe's individually. There's like an overview that I think Warren Calloway did of the Erie Lackawannas, the Clinchfield, the Santa Fe, that just kind of gives you a look at all of them. But I was surprised that they hadn't been. And so this seemed like a great opportunity with that bicentennial coming back to kind of go through them all individually. But it's an awesome resource to still have around. I'm so glad that White River, was able to pick it up and keep going.
It's one of those things too that bears repeating, especially in the Genesis line of models. Quite often, if you see online or our PDFs in the hobby shop, you'll see here's an SD45-2 as it appeared in 72 to 77. It's a broad range. Okay, we understand that, but the reason why we put those dates is something that you touched on there a minute ago, Tony, is people forget that, railroads will order a locomotive new and they come from the factory with a certain paint scheme and a certain amount of details. And let's say maybe 10, 12 years down the road, the railroad has added ditch lights, or they've gone to a Nathan 5 chime versus a Leslie 3 chime. Maybe they've moved the bell. And so it's still essentially the same locomotive, but it's been altered. It's been modified in some way. And then, of course, once they get merged or sold or anything like that, who knows what can happen with them. And this is a great reason to look at Diesel Era, because it really pinpoints when that model existed in that picture, what it looked like, what it had for accessories.
You talk about those changes. I don't know how you guys do that, but to me, it's mind-boggling to try to get that era, get that look. Because look at this shot of 5670 there, and check out the fans that you can see the dynamic brake have got, the lead one has the full open screen, but the one behind it kind of has that button or, the section in the center, as do the other three. And those kind of things get interchanged all the time. In fact, a lot of times you can even see that ground level looking up at a locomotive, because the collars or the things around those fans, don't come painted, and they'll be left in primer or a raw metal look, so you can see a changed out fan. So it becomes crazy when you start getting into some of that minutia of, boy, as delivered is one thing, but man, once they're out there in the wild, stuff changes all over. Like this one, that plate behind the air conditioner shows a skate type antenna. The early ones came with the round can type antenna. And the air conditioner, for example, 6 of the first order came with the air conditioners, and then the second and third orders all had air conditioners. So again, it really becomes, you think, well, an SD45-2, they're probably all the same. And it's like, oh, between the production phase differences and the things the railroad would spec between orders, there's a lot to it. Yeah,
it really is. It really is. And something else too. And this is again where social media and YouTube is a great help for people. Now, Derek, I'm going to put you on the spot here for a little bit, but
all right.
I think it was this past summer you did a review of the Genesis GP15-1s, and I knew a little bit about them. They were former Conrail units. And Derek, you actually found out that the sound on yours, the horn wasn't quite right. Fortunately, since it's a Tsunami 2, you can change that. Now, Derek's review was so good. I think
it was the prime mover, actually.
Was it the prime mover? Yeah, it was the prime mover.
Prime mover. After the fact, I thought that's not right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I've watched your review, and of course I've got the switching layout behind me that I've been building, and I thought, man, you know what, GP15 would be a great model for this. So I went out and I I actually bought my own, and I actually set it up based on Derek's review, right down to the horn. You know, once he told me, oh, this was a former Conrail unit, it had this type of horn, I was able to find some YouTube videos of former Conrail GP15-1s.
I believe you were right.
And
The horn wasn't the right.
yeah,
horn.
I think you said it was a Leslie. You
Yeah.
know, believe it or not, I've slept since then, but it's one of those things
It
where
feels like
so
it's been years ago that I did that. So I'm trying to remember.
And you know, I was able to sit down with the locomotive on a program track and my computer over here and just compare the sound from the Tsunami to the YouTube video until I found it. And so now it's, you know, it's pretty intense. And, you know, when you couple that with, say, with this one here, I've actually got a proto throttle to it. So that really makes it a more realistic experience. But, you know, with that being said, Derek, how long does it take you to do an average review like that?
It just depends on how easily it flows when I start doing the filming. Sometimes, you know, you fumble your words and you got to redo it. You redo it. And the more you start fumbling, the more frustrated you get, which causes you to fumble more. So sometimes it can take an entire day of just filming different things. And then you got the editing aspect of it, which is hours right there. And then sometimes you run into, you know, you're in the middle of editing and you realize, oh, I said something wrong. What do you do now? Well, I've already grabbed my camera, went down to the layout room, set everything back up just to refilm maybe a 15-second piece because I got something wrong and I didn't realize it until I went to edit. So, I mean, there are a lot of hours involved in making a review video. I don't think people realize it. Yeah. That's never done it anyways.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it you know, as somebody that's sitting on this side of the monitor, you're thinking, wow, this is great. This guy's got this cool model. He's got this great layout, you know, and he's making all this money. He's driving an Audi, you know, A8 or whatever. He's living in a man. No, it's not like that, is it?
No,
nothing like that.
No.
A lot of work, a lot of investment, and of course, you know, a lot of research too, because you'll be in a position where you have a model that you're going to review.
Yes.
And even if it's a prototype that you know, and I mean, I'm there, I'm sure, Tony, you've walked into this when you've had to do an article, and you still want to make sure you've got the information right before you go out there to YouTube or print it in a magazine.
I've actually, before I've done a review video, I couldn't find pictures of the actual prototype, but I've found a YouTube video of someone rail fanning and actually found that exact locomotive or whatever it is. It was actually a Norfolk Southern locomotive. I can't remember which one it was now, but I actually stopped it frame by frame by frame so I could compare the real one to the model just to see if there was any difference or what was missing that, you know, or wasn't right, or maybe not right, or, you know, and I've actually done that. So yeah, there is some research involved too.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's always a lot of fun though, isn't it? I love that part of it, Derek, you know, going through. Yeah. And again, as Jim said, there's sometimes I can be reviewing some, oh, I know Rio Grande, you know, Jeep 40s or this or that. But then I'll go through like Straypack's book on Rio Grande Motive Power and reread it and then find like, oh, I hadn't realized that. So there's always that fun discovery of, oh, I thought I knew that, but, you know, here's this. So
and for someone like me that was away from the hobby and even, you know, trains in general for so long, that I'm actually learning some history that I didn't know while I'm doing it. So, I mean, it's kind of catching up on things that I missed out on.
Yeah. It's, you know, go ahead, Tony.
I was going to ask you, cause I'd forgotten that I think you got that proto throttle last summer, didn't you? At the St. Louis. Yeah. When it suddenly hit me, I didn't care. How do you like it? How's that been working for you?
I don't like it at all.
You don't like it at all?
I love it. Absolutely love it. I got it right here.
So cool, yeah.
So, you know, and it's funny. I was reading a forum recently, and somebody was saying on Train Tuesday there should be a drinking game every time Jim says something about a Mustang or a switching layout. But I love switching layouts. I've got the HO one behind me, and off camera I've got an N scale one. And you know, if you're into operations, if you're more of somebody that likes to do a point-to-point layout that actually has some industry switching, I'll tell you, coming from I've operated a full-scale NW2 and an RS1325, and that is so close. You know, the only thing that's missing is the bass and the rumble underneath you, but it really does up your game and switching, because you know we're kind of spoiled when we have, you know, your standard, you know, controller like this. You can stop on a dime, and we all know that's not how it works in the real world. With this one here, you have to apply brakes, you have to do some timing, and suddenly the going back and forth isn't so easy anymore. It really puts another level into it. So yeah, if anybody out there is interested in that kind of stuff, I highly recommend one of these.
And I think you can Google it's Iowa Scaled Engineering.
Yeah.
Those
yeah,
guys
Iowa
out in
scale.
Colorado Springs.
Everyone I've seen that bought one of those loves them.
They are so cool. My assistant editor Shane Mason was in on the beta testing and had an early version, and we have two of them in the Model Railroad News collection. So yeah, that early beta and then another one, and yeah, they're fantastic. And again, for like that switching layout, that's what I wanted to ask you is, you know, just to run trains. Yeah, you know, an old Tyco pack could let me run a train around and around on a 4x8, but like that shelf switching layout like that is ideal for that. And it does really add, as you say, like I think that's an NCE throttle you've got there. Those are fantastic, but that proto throttle with the braking and the other stuff adds just that little bit more realism in the way it's all designed, that it's like the console of an old, you know, unit. Those are fantastic. Yeah,
it really, you know, it's modeled after an EMD control stand. And you know, the other nice thing that's kind of cool is it's entirely built in the United States and Canada. You know, all the components and everything, and it's something we don't see as much anymore. But it's kind of neat to know that that's designed and built here in America, and it just complements. If you've got an Athearn Genesis locomotive and you're into that kind of prototype modeling, you owe it to yourself to at least consider it. You know, they're usually at an RPM meet or a show. Go to their booth and give them a try. It's a lot of fun. And yeah, it's just another one of those things about our hobby. You know, we're blessed with our hobby that there's so many different segments we can enjoy, whether it be research or switching or, you know, passenger service, whatever.
I know Tim Garland, his YouTube channel is Seaboard Central Railroad, I believe.
Okay.
He uses one of those and he loves it. He's an actual real Norfolk Southern engineer, and he goes over that controller a lot in his videos, and even how to set it up and everything. And he raves about it, and he says it's like the real thing.
Yeah, it's spooky how it is. There's some work you have to do as far as, you know, setting up your decoder, but there's some great YouTube videos out there showing you how to do it, and specifically Athearn Genesis locomotives. And wow, you know, this is a great time to be in the hobby. It really is. Who is it, Tony, that says this is more popular than we think it is, and it's going to blow up, and we're all going to be covered in model railroad goo? Who says that?
That would be my friend Lionel Strang with the Modeler's Life podcast. And I think he is correct. Yes,
I do too. You know, here's a question for both of you on that note. I'll start with you, Derek, and then Tony, I'll have you follow up. As far as people coming to shows and getting active in the hobby, are you seeing some younger folks joining the ranks of model railroading?
Actually, I'm surprised at how many younger folks are at train shows and things like that. I really don't know if I believe the saying that the hobby is dying. I don't see it. I don't see it.
Yeah, I agree. Tony, what about you?
Same here, and I run into that a lot because a lot of reviewers and things that come to me and want to review things, you know, like my assistant editor's 25. I mean, I'm the old guy at Model Railroad News by a lot. That, you know, everybody's in their, you know, 20s, 30s, whatever, and those are the guys that are into all that stuff, like the electronics and the other things, where I gotta, you know, message them about this time of night going, hey, I'm trying to review this or that, and how do you turn this on? What do I need to hit, or how do I reprogram that? And they immediately know. So I think that there's a real interest in it, and that's exciting to run into a lot of those people like that. And that's been one of the things with the pandemic that we've seen a lot of those guys getting onto YouTube, being more on social media because they don't have, well, like my friend Drew Warrington out in Delaware that started his channel because he couldn't go to his model railroad club.
Sure.
And, you know, he's in college, I think now. He's a freshman or sophomore in college.
He's a young guy, yeah.
Volunteers at like an excursion railroad. So, yeah, it's amazing. It's not just for old guys like me, you know.
No, and I think you touched on something too with the technology aspect of it. I think that really excites a lot of the younger generation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're seeing it too at Athearn. You know, we've done a few surveys asking, you know, if we do another locomotive or if we do a different paint scheme or what have you, what would you like to see? And of course, there's also a demographic survey within there, and we're seeing that rise of not only just the eras. You're seeing a lot more guys wanting to do the 70s, 80s, 90s, even early 2000s. We have a lot of requests for Heritage 1 BNSF equipment.
Wow.
But we're seeing that trend, you know, the 20-somethings. And I always joke, it's like, you know, 20 years ago when we were at the train show, we were probably, you know, complaining about the little kid with the Tommy, the toy train in his hand and running crazy. Well, those guys grew up. And now they've got throttles in their hands, and they know a lot about the prototype as well as modeling too.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yep.
Well, that's, you know, this has been great, getting both sides of, you know, the media. I mean, Athearn has done work with both you guys, and we appreciate it. You guys up for a little bit of Q&A with our guest that's out there?
Oh, absolutely.
Sure.
All right. So, folks, if you're out there and I'm watching the comments, if you've got a question about Athearn or the prototype or anything like that for myself, Derek, or Tony, go ahead. Now's your chance. We've got some experienced guys out here today, so here's your chance, and let us know. You know, what do you think? I agree with you both. I don't necessarily believe the hobby is graying or dying. I think it's evolving. Evolving, and the younger guys are doing it, and they're doing it differently. And you know, one of the things that was a surprise to me was recently Athearn started its own TikTok account. And,
I haven't went there yet.
Yeah, you know, it's like TikTok, isn't that, you know, the videos with the cats and the you know, dancing girls and stuff? And so I went on it, you know, somewhat begrudgingly.
Oh, it was the cats. That's why.
But you know what's funny is there are a bunch of younger modelers on TikTok posting videos of their layouts, posting videos of rail fanning, and you know, Athearn is trying to keep their finger on the pulse and trying to you know, keep all the younger fans interested without alienating our older fans too, because we've got a lot of guys our ages and older that still enjoy the hobby and like certain aspects of the hobby, so we don't want to abandon them either.
Yeah, you have to cover all your bases.
Most definitely. Well, I'm looking out here while we're talking to see if I've got some questions out here. And let's see. I got one funny comment we'll throw up there. I don't do TikTok, but checked out Athearn's for the heck of it. Yeah, it's I've got some more videos I need to build for that. It's pretty interesting. It's a totally different form of social media than what I'm used to. Let's see.
I actually see a question, and I've been waiting years for someone to ask me that.
Oh, okay. Which one's that, Derek?
What is the empty tunnel access on my layout?
Yes, yeah, I'd like to know that too. Now that what is that?
I've been waiting for someone to ask me. That was actually part of one of the previous layouts that I just that section of the layout was incorporated into the newer layout, but it was originally supposed to be a roadway access to the coal mine that was on my layout, or going to be on the layout.
It's funny he asked that because
I've never removed it. I never covered it up yet. And I've been meaning to do that for a while, and I just haven't done it. It's going to get removed or covered up, but that's why it's there. And it was for a previous layout.
I can't believe I've never asked you that, because whenever Jim, when I'll see videos like 10 o'clock at night, I'll start messaging Jared, hey, good video on those UP Fast 40s, that was really cool. And I always think that when I'm watching, like, oh, I need to ask him, is that going to have like tracks and it's going to cross your line, or what's that like dead tunnel portal for?
After every video I make, I look at that in the video and think, why haven't I fixed that yet?
Yeah,
But then I kind of left it there on purpose, waiting for someone to ask me that question.
There you go.
It's kind of like your own little Easter egg.
Yep.
Let's see. I got a question here. Any news on the VIA P42s? Nothing yet, but stay tuned. Don't go away. We're always hard at work. One of the things, and Tony, I'm sure you've seen this, it wasn't as big of a deal back in the older days with model trains, but nowadays licensing is a big part of manufacturers, and we get a lot of requests. It's like, hey, you guys do, this manufacturer of vehicle, can you do this manufacturer of truck? And we can't always do that just because of licensing situations. And it's not always just about money. Sometimes it's about how the company is and such. And it certainly has changed, hasn't it, Tony?
Oh, it definitely has, most certainly. And I know, like that VIA project you guys were talking about, again, it's trying to get through agreements with them. And your new P42, the redeal on it's a fantastic model. So I know a lot of guys would like to see that, but sometimes it's beyond just, we'd like to do that. You got to get the rights and the OKs. And, again, a lot of those railroads like that, talking and dealing with the model train companies, maybe not their first order of business, that they got other fish to fry. So sure. You're not always a priority. So that it could be a challenge.
Tony, it looks like I got one here for you from Northwest Rail Fan. He wants to know what's coming up for Model Railroad News. What have you got in the works?
Well, we had Dash 2s on the cover. In fact, I'll share the screen here for a second and show what's in the new stuff. This is HO Collector. We've got Athearn stuff for each of the 4 issues throughout the year. The SD9 is featured in the current HO Collector, which is now 68 pages. We went up from 48 pages, is what we had been for our first 5 years. And because of the magazine's success, we're now 68. And Athearn, I'm doing the SD9 in this first issue that's out now. Ahead Athearn projects, we're going to look at doing the DD40 and explain where it came from, because I see that at least a couple times a year on Facebook pages and other things where someone says, why did they do that? Not the DD35. And there is no DD40, but I'll be sharing the EMD brochures that showed that, as well as the switch engine that was sold as an SW1500 that really is an SW1200. There's a whole EMD guide that was put out in '66 that shows some of those things, that they were going to be models for real models for electromotive. And that's going to be a feature. And then we're also going to do the boats and cars that were done, tooled for Lionel by Athearn in the early 60s. And, the boats just came back recently, and I tracked down that's the little 40-foot flat car with the boat load. And I have the 4 of those with like military, like the Coast Guard and Navy, that I'll feature those and then talk about where that came from. But that's what's happening in HO Collector. Now, Model Railroad News, this is our issue that's out now. The Dash 2s are 50 years old for this year, 2022. And
I can't believe that.
I know. Yeah, it is hard to believe. But the Dash 2s were introduced in 1972, and that somehow is 50 years ago. We've got Athearn's, and boy, this was a challenge to get. I think, Derek, you got one of these, didn't you? I remember we talked about it.
Yes, and I was going to do a video on it, and I couldn't bring myself to take it out of the box yet. It's still factory sealed.
That warms
Don't lose that factory air.
I get teased so much about, oh my God, he took it out of the box. So it's nice to hear someone else say they didn't want to take it out of the box.
I haven't been able to break the seal yet.
And do I see an Athearn caboose back there? Did you track down one of those?
I finally found one on eBay. Okay. Unfortunately, I had to pay eBay prices to get it.
They were hard to get. But anyway, in the current one, we review the anniversary SD40-2, and then we do a bunch of SD40-2s. As well as this is the Jeep 39-2, a real late production done for Katie in the late 80s. And then we do the GP40-2 is reviewed as well. So there's a lot of that Dash 2 stuff will be this year in Model Railroad News as well, as we touch upon, that being 50 years old.
Doesn't seem like it.
It doesn't seem like it.
No,
Yeah.
it doesn't. That's one of my favorite locomotives.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, that's probably one of everybody's favorite locomotives.
Yeah,
awesome.
definitely. Well, Zach's got a question. Zach's up there in Galesburg, if I remember right, which is BNSF country, former Burlington country. He says, Jim, how about if Athearn makes a BNSF 2245? It was a GP38 that was used on the BNSF Santa Claus Express in 1998. Wow, that was a while ago. Well, that's a possibility. I know I would like a GP38. There's a lot of roads that you could do with the GP38, not the Dash 2, but just the standard GP38. If you were CEO and chief bottle washer at Athearn, Tony, for a day, and you said, we're doing GP38s, what would you do?
Well, first, if I was the chief bottle washer and the head of Athearn for a day, I'd bring back the little Hustler switcher and the rectifier electric as Genesis 2.0s, ground lights, the whole works.
There you go.
Anyway, and then they'd quickly usher me out of the building. But I think on those 38s, I always kind of like the Penn Central, just the black with the yellow handrails and the big PC. That Penn Central got some of those about 1970, and for some reason, I've always thought those were neat looking.
That's pretty cool. What about you, Derek? Any idea what you would go for a road? That's kind of an early Jeep for you.
Yeah, I'd have to go with Tony. I like the Penn Central.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that's pretty cool. Well, that was a great question. I think I see one here for both of you guys. Let me see if I can find it again. We've got some great questions coming out here. A lot of folks joining us, so that's always a good thing. Let's see. There we go. Tom from YouTube saying, Tony and Derek, can you clue us in on any upcoming subjects for your magazines and video? I know, Tony, you just got done showing us some neat stuff with the magazine. How about you, Derek? What have you got in the works?
Well, I'm waiting on the Athearn DDA 40Xs.
That's a subtle
and the Dash 9s in Norfolk Southern. So that's on the list.
That would be, what a question for me is on your railroad, as far as like a prototype, you're mainly 6 axles on your layout, but what do you think's your favorite? Are you an EMD fan or a GE fan? What do you
I used to be strictly EMD, but I have grown to love that chug from the GEs. I love listening to a Dash 9. I just do.
Yeah. No, it is true. How about you, Tony? You have a preference?
I would go back even further. I actually like that old chug, the sound of an Alco.
There you go.
So some of the, and I'm just old enough that I can remember on like the TP&W and some road, GM&O had some Alco switchers. So yeah, some of the old Alcos I think are pretty cool. But,
yeah.
Jim, are you guys? We've got Amherst around the corner. We talked with John earlier tonight about it, and that's always, hey, what's everybody going to announce? Let us know what we. I mean, you're not going to tell us probably, but have you got a group of announcements planned for, as usual, the end of the month? And
well, yeah, we've got something that we're working on. It's going to be big news. So what we're working on.
Oh, hit the mute.
So yeah, that should come out by the end of the month.
I can read lips.
It's that Midwest, dial-up modem that I have out here in the middle of nowhere. No, to be serious, we are working on some great projects. I believe, it's almost been about a year, and most of the guys, I think you guys have met John. He's our lead developer at Athearn. And I feel sorry for the guy sometimes because he is working crazy right now. The big thing that he's working on is the AC 4400s. And we're looking forward to do the formal announcement on those. And there's going to be some roads that I know people are going to love. And we kind of did a survey with those too. So we're doing the popular choices on that first run. So that's going to be some big news. And, the other thing too is people forget we do N scale. We do Athearn N scale. So John and I do N scale at Athearn. We're not just HO. So I'm just going to say that. And since John's a developer, I'm hoping he makes some of us happy. So we've also got some stuff coming out this spring, late winter, early spring, that's going to be some big news. But I can't say any more than that. I'm sworn to secrecy.
All right. I had to ask. I know people,
Understood. You're in the media. I mean, that's what it is.
Big show coming up. What are you going to announce? Yeah.
So, and speaking of that, Tom, my Rock Island fan, he says, Jim, any upcoming Rock Island Genesis items to talk about? It's okay. We'll keep it between ourselves. I don't know if I've got any Rock Island in here. Yeah, Tom, you are going to be pleased in about 2 weeks. You're going to be pleased. And Tony already knows because I already bugged Tony about prototype pictures of that. Yep. So, yeah. Rock Island fans, Rock Island fans, they always get such a bad rap. I always joke that the Rock Island was the Boston and Maine of the Midwest because they kind of were similar. But really, the Rock Island was just a cool railroad, despite its problems. It was a neat railroad to model, and there's a lot of fans out there.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
So let's see what else I've got for BN6. Oh, man. I would be for that. I don't know if we can do that, but I would be for it. Ted is asking GP18s. We did the GP18s and they came out last year. And Tony, you did a review of one, didn't you? Was it the Northern Pacific one that you did a review on, or was that?
I think I might have reviewed a Norfolk and Western in that early 70s black NW scheme. And then we did do a Northern Pacific. My buddy Chris Atkins down in the Dallas area is a big Northern Pacific fan. He reviewed it. But yeah, that was from that was that the first run of Jeep 18s?
That was the first run. Yeah, that was the inaugural run. And you know what? I had to buy the BN ones because I'm kind of a closet BN fan. And man, they're just it's a locomotive that if you take the GP7s and GP9s, they produce so many of them.
Mm-hmm.
When it cut down to the GP18, it was just like, they didn't do as many of them, especially in the high hood.
No, it didn't. Yeah, it didn't sell the same. Yeah,
just did not. But the roads that got them, like it was Mopac, I think, had the most of the GP18s. And,
I'm looking forward to that when you do those with the Lonos and the AAR trucks. And remember, 2 of those Mopacs are bicentennials.
That's right.
So I've had a number of people ask me that. Hey, do you think Avon will do that Jeep 18 and Mopac? It's like, I hope so.
Yeah, no, that would be cool. The GP18s. So far we've only done the one run, but I think it's about time to do another run. I like those high hood first gens. They're kind of neat. Let's see what else we've got. Eric is asking for, here's an Alco fan, RS3s. I think you're going to be happy. I like Tom's comment though. And Mopac's another one. I'm guilty of railroaditis. There's a lot of railroads that I like. Those Mopacs were just special, weren't they?
Yeah.
Let's see.
I would even throw in an RS2.
There you go. That would be in.
When I was a kid, I remember RS2s on my uncle's layout, and it's stuff that you remember. I'd love to have it. Love to have an RS2 on my layout.
I'm trying to think, is it the only Alco in the current Athearn line? Is that it's the old Roundhouse Tooling RS3 that's been upgraded? I think that's the only.
That's the only. Yeah.
The lone Alco. Yeah.
Yep, that's pretty much it. It's It's a unique model. It's been updated, and it's probably going to be updated some more. Eric's got and you know what? As a BN fan, I have to throw him some weight here. SPNS RS3s to be specific. That would be cool. You don't see a lot of SPNS. You know, the other railroads that made up the BN get all the credit, it seems like. But
yeah,
SPNS was a cool railroad.
they were a neat road.
Let's see. Eric's got a comment for you, Derek. He says, I think you should just keep the tunnel to keep people wondering.
Well, I've been doing a good job of that so far. So maybe I will.
Let's see. Wow, here's an interesting. I'll throw it up there. As a Bangor and Aroostook fan, I can relate. Rock Island Bl2. Remember the Bl2?
Yeah.
What a weird locomotive, right?
Yeah, the missing link between F units and Jeeps. Yeah.
Really kind of and it wasn't really a success for EMD. Bangor and Aroostook was really one of the bigger railroads to get those. And they used those things right up into the 70s.
Rock Island had some CNEI, Monon. There's the BL1 that would have had a steam generator and had the pipe up between the windshield. And I think that is the demonstrator that ended up over at Rock Island. The rest are BL2s, but it's basically just a carved down F3, more or less. They were heading in the right direction, but needed to get a little more radical than they did. But
yeah,
that's an odd duck. Yeah.
Here's one for you, Derek. And I am going to second this. Derek, is a video of your layout coming soon. I'd like to see that too.
I've had some fans that are eager for me to get back to the layout, and I don't blame them. I want to get back to the layout. I'm trying.
Here's a question really for the group. As you know, we offer Genesis and ready to roll models with the Tsunami 2, which is a great setup. But we also offer them in DC. And Ron R says, hey, I pre-ordered my Genesis DD40AX, SD90 Mac H, SD80 Mac, and the MP15 ACs. And it looks like you got all the non-sound DCC. Is it hard to convert them? Not really, not today. You've probably done a few of those, haven't you, Tony?
Oh, a little bit. I hand that off quite a bit. But yeah, I mean, that's part of the review thing is always pop the shell off. That 70 ACU, I opened it up to look at and get pictures before sending it up to Canada for the reviewer. And yeah, I mean, I think the conversion over to silent DCC is easy. And you guys are offering that on what the latest Roundhouse, some of the Jeeps now have those NCE decoders for that. I like that option. But I don't think it's not that hard. I mean, what do you think, Derek? I mean, certainly just putting a decoder in.
It would depend on how the lighting functions are set up on the decoder you put in compared to how they're wired to the board that's installed. So you may have to program some lighting functions to get them to operate correctly. I know whenever I put the Tsunami 2 in the DC ready or DCC ready version that I had to look at and see which wire or which LEDs went to which function pad on the board inside, and then actually map that whenever I did the programming. It wasn't just a plug and play. You had to do some function mapping.
I know there's times where at Midwest and I will pick a model up and I'll say to my assistant editor, Shane, now if I buy this one without the decoder in it, you can just put a decoder in it and the sound and everything. And he'll say, just buy the one with. Go ahead and get
it. It's rarely plug and play, really, to be honest with you anymore, because of the lighting functions and stuff. It's you have to do some sort of programming.
Here's one for you, Tony, and this is a great question. This is coming in from John. He says, Tony, how many different stories and topics do you work on at a time, and how do you know what topic to use for an issue versus another topic? That's a great question.
It's really become both hobby history and doing the magazines is the hobby for me anymore. And I work from home. I live in rural Missouri, north of Kansas City. And so a lot of times it literally is, as I'm having that cup of coffee, I'll think, oh, I got that Athearn whatever. Like you can see the boats are behind me over here. Where are they? There they are. So I'm going to start working on the boats this weekend for HO Collector in the future. I always have things coming through that I'm doing photography or scale speed testing, that kind of thing, sending off to reviewers. So a lot of times, again, there's enough spoils around here. It's like, well, what strikes me that I'd like to knock off today or what we want to get in the next magazine. So believe it or not, a lot of times it is just what seems like the neatest thing that I want to play with today. So
Yeah.
it's a cool
I know
deal.
you're always, I remember we caught up at the St. Louis RPM, and typical editor, because I've been in that chair for before too, and it's we're talking, we're having fun. I think me, you, and Shane were debating the many fine attributes of Star Trek versus Next Generation, and you were in your head, I could see it. You're like, well, wait a minute, I got Model Railroad News due on this date, and I got to get this in the hopper for Collector. So you're always working on something, no matter where you're at.
And it's fun when you can get some of those pieces, like things that will work of, okay, this is new, like there's some new whatever coming out in the hobby. Well, what was the first one, or what was the first time this got released? So let's do a thing in HO Collector, and then what prototype is the model we're going to reviewing that I might be able to do like a diesel era feature. So it's fun when you can kind of bring some of those pieces together and review a model, talk about an old version of the model and the prototype. And luckily I got 3 magazines. I can kind of send it off in each direction. So that's kind of neat to put puzzle pieces like that together.
Derek, what about you? I mean, it's a little bit different format for you. I mean, you have a daily job that you do. Of course, you're an adult,
Right.
so you have all those adult responsibilities. How do you come about doing your videos, and what kind of a schedule do you usually have?
Well, I like to focus doing my videos on a weekend that I don't have to work, but right now we've been slammed, and sometimes I have to come home from work and hurry up and film, and sometimes it takes me, it's not a one-day thing. In fact, my last video I did with the Steam, that was a 2-week project. I worked on that a little bit over 2 weeks before I finally, just when I had time to get down and do some filming, I did, and then filmed a little more a couple days later, and then they got to the editing part of it. But that was actually started 2 weeks before it went live.
Yeah.
So it's a struggle right now finding the time to do it. That's mainly why you don't see me getting a lot done on the layout, because I don't have the time. Working overtime, basically.
Sure. Here's a question for all of us, really directed mainly towards Athearn, but undecorated units are a needed thing, Jim. And Forrest, thanks for that question. If you remember back in December, the SW 1200s that we introduced, undecorated was in there, and I was sorry, 1500s rather. Let's get some feedback from you first, Derek. Have you ever done any painting on your own, or detail stuff like that, or have you pretty much?
I've done some detailing. I never painted like a full locomotive or anything like that. Did some weathering, airbrush weathering and stuff like that. Now I have done some model car builds where I actually completely painted the model car and stuff like that.
Oh.
But
Okay, Tony, what about you? Have you done some of that?
I not nearly as much as I used to, but yes, I used to paint and decal quite a bit. My guys do that review for me. They do a lot of that. Ryan Crawford over in Springfield does CNIM. I'm always seeing pictures of green unit he's bringing out of the shop. Shane Mason paints and decals in scale and HO all the time. So does Justin Sobeck in the St. Louis area. So those guys do a lot of that. I think the challenge for the undeck, and it from the manufacturer standpoint, it's thing I hear all the time, is yes, there are people that really want them, but there's not a lot. So it's a challenge to make them. And I hear that from other manufacturers. And with all the road specific situation we have now, okay, what would be your undeck? Like these SD45-2s you're doing. Okay, I'd like an undeck. Well, like what flavor? Do you want
Right.
the Seaboard, or do you want that modern Norfolk Southern? And then we can't put all those parts in the box, and so it really becomes a complicated situation. And I think so many of the modern shells, as I look at a lot of that stuff now, again, blue box days, it had a pair of horns and you put the number board inserts in.
Yeah.
So mask it up and paint it. And you look at some of these models now, and it's like, wow, I don't even know where and how I'd begin on, when you think of like the Athearn cabs that have got that window piece for the sliding windows is actually behind a plastic frame that goes over that top.
Yeah.
And then you have the cab shade. When you start thinking of some of those pieces, like, okay, how are you going to paint, mask, and get around all of this? That I can't remember who I talked to, but there was somebody I talked to in the last year that actually said they look for finished models that are like Southern Pacific, that are gray,
Okay.
just like the red ends, and they can wipe Southern Pacific off the side and do some repainting to them already built, because undecorateds are hard to find. And then again, putting them all together and getting everything in there is, it's a challenge. That
without breaking something.
Yeah.
That's just
Yeah,
it.
it's just patch it.
So again, I agree, and I think it's great. And there's companies that obviously still do. You guys do from time to time,
Mhm.
but it's a challenge, and it's a niche thing. It's such a
It really
small,
is. It really is. Well, the other thing too is, and myself, coming both N scale and HO, in the early days, if you modeled, say, something like the Boston to Maine or Maine Central, it wasn't produced as much. You pretty much had the big railroads out west, so you forced yourself to paint. And of course, after painting, then you started detailing, and that was pretty common, like you said, in the blue box era. But I look back at that time, and it's like I didn't have a layout. I spent all my time at the workbench, painting and detailing, and doing all that research. And we, like you said, we live in a great time where we can have a model that sometimes all we got to do is weather it and put it on our layout. But if you look at the YouTube channels of the layouts that's out there, and the quality of layouts that I've seen in magazines and on YouTube in the last 10, 20 years is so far beyond what we saw in the old days. Not to take away from the old layouts, but just to see what people are doing now. And like you said, it is a toss-up, especially as a manufacturer. We realize there's a need out there, but it's a real small niche. Now, for you guys that are out there that want the undecorated, we ran those after a survey. We actually had a lot of you guys vote and say, yeah, we want an undecorated. We offered the undecorated, and I'm happy to say that we did okay with those. So we'll probably do it again. And that kind of goes into this next question. This is a question coming in from John. He says, why does Athearn limit the number of models versus the old blue box models that were always available? And John, that's an excellent question. And Tony, I think you and I were talking about this the other day. If you think back 25, 30 years ago, you'd go to your hobby shop of your choice, and there was this wall of blue box. I know there was for me. And yeah, you could, wide vision caboose, there it is, whatever road you wanted, GP38-2, whatever road you wanted, it was always there. And what happened is the internet happened. And with the internet, I think all of us as a community, modeling community, got smarter. We realized, the GP38-2 and the Boston to Maine is not the same as the GP38-2 on the Rock Island. There's subtle differences. Maybe it's the nose, maybe it's the placement of certain details. So we got smarter, and the consumers started asking for more detailed items. And now look at where we're at in 2022. We have SD70 ACUs in the Genesis line that are not only specific to the Canadian Pacific, but they're specific to the actual road number, right down to the decals on the cab, or the way the door handle is actually molded onto the front door. And so to answer your question, John, don't think of the blue box as the same realm as Genesis or even Ready to Roll. Think of it as this. Remember back in the old days, Tony, we had brass. And brass was what? A limited run. That was the epitome of scale back then. And now we're kind of got the best of both worlds. I'm dropping another TNG reference there. you've got the best of both worlds. You've got something that is like a brass locomotive. It's got a specific era, specific railroad, specific down to the number in most cases in the Genesis line, but it's a custom run. You know, you can only do that for a limited amount of time, and that's why so many manufacturers, including Athearn, have a pre-order system, because we want to say, here's the SD45-2, and this is specific to the Santa Fe. We can't just take that shell and paint it into a chassis. We have to keep it specific to the line. So to answer your question, John, it's one of those things where the large majority of the consumer is more, I'd say, prototype specific. Wouldn't you, Tony?
I think that and again that it's real apples and oranges. And like those ST9s I just did in HO Collector are a good example. 1974, one road number each: Burlington Northern, Milwaukee, UP, Santa Fe, Pennsy, and Undeck. And I think that's it. And that is it. I mean, like, there were no follow-ups in 75 or 79, or those came out in 74. They stayed the same. In fact, even after Irv Athearn passed away and the new ownership came in the early 90s, a lot of things got a lot of new road. I was surprised the ST9s basically did not. So again, look at it that way. What if, you know, these Genesis models were done and that Santa Fe SD45-2 was only available in bookends and one road number, and it's been out since 2005. And that's it. There's no other road numbers. There's not a war bonnet. There's not a bicentennial. You're getting one.
Yep.
And that's what it was. Because again, that SD9 would have been available from 1974 into the mid to late 90s. So 20 years with no new releases. So again, the SD45-2 in the Genesis line is 2005. It's almost 20 years old. So take whatever was announced there in 2005, whittle it down to like Erie, Clinchfield, Santa Fe, one road number, one paint scheme. That's it. And that's all that's ever been released. Would that be okay? I mean, I don't think people would, you know, again, it's a much different thing, but that's a way to look at it.
Yeah, Derek, you had mentioned too that you were kind of away from the hobby for a little bit. When you were younger, you did it. A lot of people do that, you know, myself included. I was into it as a young guy, and then, you know, cars and girls and college and blah, blah, blah. And then you find yourself back into the hobby again. And you probably saw a lot of changes when you got back into it.
Oh yeah. Mind blown. You know what I mean? I still had old horn hook couplers when I left the hobby. So I mean, there was a lot of change.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, for your type of modeling, especially now, you do primarily present day Norfolk Southern. So I think a lot of people don't realize how specific modern day locomotives are to their railroad, and Norfolk Southern's no different. I mean, they may order stuff from the factory new, but as in time they start collecting locomotives from other areas, and they're all going to have different details. They might be the same locomotive,
right,
but their lineage is from a different railroad. And so for you, you know, the details in the ready to roll and Genesis probably make a big deal, don't they?
Oh yeah, it's fun. I mean, it's what's out there now is very nice and very fun. There is a place, or was a place, for the blue box. Don't get me wrong. I mean, that's where it started, you know. But you can't look past the details and like you said, road specific road number details.
Yeah. And I mean, just to kind of review, Nick, I see your question out there. I mean, it's a limited run, and maybe it's one of those things that you got to think about it like this. In the old days, we could go up to a shelf and get whatever model we wanted pretty much all the time, and it probably wasn't right. I'm pretty sure Rock Island never had RF-16s, but you know, Tyco thought they did. I think folks are just more in tune to the prototype than they were in the past. And then when you get to that level of detail, when you get to that level of road name and road number specific, it's not something that you can just mass produce over and over again, especially in a small scale like this. And so that's why we do the limited runs. we do enough to fulfill the pre-orders that we have every month. So when you hear me on Train Tuesday, I'll say, you have till this date to get your pre-orders in. And it's, I don't know if you thought about this, Tony, but this is pretty prototypical. I mean, back in the day when a railroad was going to order something from EMD or Alco, they had a pre-order, and those got built after the pre-order was in. That's kind of the same thing. So
yeah.
It gets as real as it gets, I guess you could say.
We're spoiled now.
We are spoiled.
Yeah.
We live in a great time. There's so much great stuff out there, and it's so fun to be a model railroader right now. I'm going to look at a couple of more questions, and then I think I'm going to let you guys go. I'm going to release you into the wild. Oh, let's see what else we've got. Let me see. Yeah, going forward, I mean, while I'm looking for a question, Tony, I'll start with you. If you could see Athearn produce the next model, brand new model, what would you recommend, or what would you like to see besides the Hustler?
Athearn has always been real heavy with EMD prototypes, or at least in more contemporary times. I think it would be fun to see Athearn go down the path of some of the other, companies that, again, like the Genesis line, we've got F units, we've got early Jeeps, we've got some of the Dash 2 Jeeps. It'd be fun to see Athearn explore some of the GE or Alco, some of the other things. But, I don't know in particular what would be a model that might hit me, but that would be fun to see, is Alcos or GEs or something on that same, same level that we've seen for EMD prototypes.
Okay. How about you, Derek?
I want to see the Norfolk Southern F units from the business train with operating ditch lights.
Oh, okay.
It hasn't been done yet. I want to see the operating ditch lights in this.
Okay. That could be interesting. That was a pretty slick operation. That was pretty cool. Now, I don't, Tony, you probably know. I don't know. Norfolk Southern doesn't have those anymore, do they? They got rid of those.
I don't think they do. No, yeah, they got rid of them, sadly. Yeah. And
I don't know why. That's so sad.
Yeah. They would be a challenge too, because I don't think that's in as multi-part as that Highliner tooling is that you have for the F units. There's not a version with holes in its nose for ditch lights. So
no, but I want to see it done.
There you go. Challenge is out there, so we'll have to see if I can get that recommendation put in there. That's pretty cool. That's something that, there's so many F units out there right now, but if you look at it, those F units are pretty much the heritage style. And I think somebody in the comments will correct me, I'm sure. I think the FRA said ditch lights on any locomotive that was manufactured after 46. If it's before 46, they can get grandfathered in if it's used on a tourist rail. But anything that has to ride on Class 1, and it was manufactured, I believe, after 45, 46, has to have ditch lights. And, now that you mention it, I have not seen anybody do an F unit, with ditch lights. So
nope.
That's a good suggestion. I like that. All right. And let's see. We've got a lot of GE rail fans out here tonight. A lot of people asking for U30s, B23-7s, U28Cs. All of those would be good. Some of those GEs probably a little bit too late for your era, Derek. But
yeah,
Tony, I know you like some of those old U-boats.
And that's on my list for HO collector, or I do collector consists for railroad model craftsmen on a quarterly basis, and that's something I've talked with Otto on, because the blue box U-boats are 50 years old. 1972 was that group of the U28, U30, U33 Bs and Cs. All those models hit 50 years this year.
Wow. Here's a good question from James. It's an industry question. He says, do you avoid some models because other manufacturers might be doing those at the time. You know, it's something that we don't think about as modelers. I think sometimes we are so tied up in our own community that we forget that, you know, as great as model railroading is, I still say it's probably one of the more popular hobbies of miniatures, but it's still kind of a niche if you think about it, you know. So yeah, there's a few select manufacturers in the industry, and you obviously don't want to oversaturate the market with, you know, an example of being the F units. At this point, a lot of manufacturers have done the F units. When we came out with the SD70 ACUs, that was a position where Athearn was in a position where nobody had done it before. And we actually had CP approach us, and we had access to all that information. And so it just worked out that way. For the most part, to answer your question, we like to offer something that somebody else is not working on, and we don't have a crystal ball. We mainly get surveys and feedback from you folks, and if we get enough comments and questions to do it, we'll do it. And that way, you know, at the end of the day, we're all model railroaders. We like to run what we need. Doesn't always necessarily mean a specific manufacturer, but Athearn is pretty much committed to doing something that the other guys don't do. And, you know, that's why we have some of these odd, you know, like the SD90 Mac H. That's kind of an odd, you know, 30 years ago, nobody would have done that, you know, because it was a demonstrator in UP. And here we are. You know, maybe brass would have been an option, but so there you go, James. It's a roundabout way of answering that question. But yeah, for the most part, the hobby is small enough. We try to be cognizant of what others are doing and not oversaturate the market with something, which can be hard sometimes.
I've actually had that over the years said to me when I said, you know, how'd you pick that, or why, you know, when it'd be something that seems like really, you know, and I've been told, well, did it on purpose because nobody else would do it. So again, there's that thought of, okay, if I pick an SD40-2, there's already so many available, and yeah, I could probably bring something to the table that hasn't been done. But again, you're in this big pond of a bunch of other people, but you decide to make, as you say, like that 70 ACU or that 90 Mac. Well, that's probably going to be just you. So,
you know. Yeah. Randall's come back with the Google answer. He says ditch lights were mandatory on all locomotives by 97. That is correct. You're not wrong. That was all modern Class 1, Class 2, Class 3 locomotives. What we're talking about, though, is there are some, because you don't see steam engines with ditch lights. We have some locomotives out here at the Monticello Railway Museum that are from the 30s and 40s, and they don't have ditch lights. So there is a grandfather clause in there. I just don't have it off the top of my head. You know, one of the things that is fun for me anyways on Train Tuesday, and I'm sure you guys run into it too. Tony, do you ever think that you've reached that limit of knowing all the train knowledge in your head? Do you think you've achieved that level of knowing it all?
No, and that has to be one of the both prototypes and model stuff. I'm always thrilled when someone sends me an email with like, have you ever seen this Athearn whatever before? No, I've never seen that in that kind of a box from Athearn before. Like, wow, where did you get that? So it never ceases to amaze me that when I think, oh yeah, I know everything Tycho ever did, then someone will send me an email like, wow, I didn't know that. So that's part of, and same with prototype. Again, the minute you think, I'm sure I know this, then you stumble across, wow, I didn't know that happened to that unit, and they repainted it like this or did that to it. So now that's, I think, part of the fun is there's always new things to discover.
How about you, Derek? You ever get that on your channel? It's like, hey, how did you not know this? Or, you know, you ever feel that way?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have the wealth of knowledge that Tony does, so I definitely get it.
It's one of those things where the hobby is so big, both with the prototype and the model, that I think it's impossible to know it all. I really do. There's just so much information out there, and Yeah, I've made a mistake or two on Train Tuesday, and I'll hear about it the next day in the comments section. And it's one of those things where there is a lot of info to remember, and a lot of dates, a lot of other things. I'm glad the developers have the luxury of all those tools right in front of them while they're doing the
Yeah.
doing the models.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we're about ready to wrap this up. Any parting thoughts for us, Tony?
What a fun show! This is a cool idea and great. I know I know I've messaged and stuff, but I was trying to think. I don't even know if I've actually ever talked to Derek on the phone before. We've messaged, email, Facebook Messenger, that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think this is the first time that I virtually have actually met Derek. So that's very cool.
Yes.
I love your videos, and that's very awesome to
Thank you.
get to chat with you. Yeah,
I'm glad I got to chat with you actually, kind of in person.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
very cool.
No, this was fun.
Great. I'm looking forward to this. Like I said, we're going to do this once a month, every month going on. This was the Athearn Extra 1.1. Next time we'll have the 1.2. We'll talk about. I'm not going to tell you because you're going to have to wait. But some of the things that we talked about tonight, the SD90, the SD80, and the SD45-2. If any of those locomotives are of interest to you, talk to your dealer, whether it be an online retailer or you're lucky enough to have a local hobby shop. Talk to them. You've got till Friday the 28th to pre-order those. And if you have never seen the Athearn live, we also have Train Tuesday every Tuesday at 7 p.m. You can find us on. Are you ready for this? This is Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and now TikTok. You can find us on all of those social media platforms.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, no, it's crazy, isn't it? Go over to YouTube.
And tomorrow night, Jim, we're back with our buddy Ken Jr., right?
We are. We're going to be talking SD45-2s again, right?
Right. Train World Live. So, yeah, tomorrow. And I'll have different new pictures of, I'm going to go more on the Bicentennial Group of 5. So that's tomorrow night. I believe it's 7 Central.
7 Central,
and
8 o'clock for you folks on the East Coast. Yeah.
Train World with Ken Bianco Jr. So those are always fun shows.
Those are great. He does a great job with that, and yeah, it should be a great time. So go on over there to check out his live. Like Tony said, that's tomorrow night at 8 o'clock for you Eastern guys. And Derek, thanks again for showing up. This was a great time. Hopefully we can have you on again and talk more about your videos and stuff. And Tony, once again, always a pleasure to have you on here.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, lots of fun. I think with that, we're going to go ahead and pull the pin and call this show good to go. So,
all right,
Derek, I'll let you sign off first. We'll go with Tony, and then we'll finish up.
All right. Well, hey, thanks for having me. This was fun, and I like to talk to everyone out there. So thanks for having me.
Tony?
Live long prosper, everybody.
Oh, yeah. I like it.
And as always, everybody out there, hey, let's do some modeling this weekend. Let's get some work done in the workshop on the layout. Do some great modeling. Hey, introduce that young guy in the club to how great this hobby is. Take some time to share some wisdom with them. And you know what? Be happy, be healthy, be safe. And you've heard me say it before. I'll say it again. High greens, everybody. Take care. Good night.